It is warm today. I mean, it's only going to get worse. It's summer in Louisiana. I just got to buckle up or escape, whichever of those two are the most approachable for me. I mean, I'd love to like make a break for it to Colorado or something for the summer. A lot of people have been trying to convince me like North Carolina is cool. I don't know. I've never been there. I know they have a lot of solar panels, but that's about all I know about North Carolina based off of having flown over there one time. Ooh, I almost forgot. There we go. But yeah, a lot of solar panels in North Carolina. That's all I really know about it. John Callahan asks, quick question, are you related to a Kenton rainwater? Uh, Also can confirm North Carolina is very cool. Um, no, I'm not. I don't know of a Kenton rainwater currently. I mean, I'm sure it's possible a distant cousin, but there are a lot of rainwaters around the, the United States that are, I don't know, as far as I'm aware, kind of different um, branches, I guess. I don't know what other term to use. Because, a popular question I get a lot when people find out about my last name is like, are you Native American? And as far as I'm aware, within my family, within our lineage, like our heritage, whatever term you want to use, yo, Leo Empire, yo, verb. Um, yeah, there are a lot of people here today. Um, what was I saying? Okay, yeah. So like within my family's genealogy, as far as we're aware on the rainwater side, it's like pretty European. Like we're not really sure what kind of European, but pretty European. Um, Leo Empire asks if it's possible for me to turn my sound down a bit. Sure. You could turn your sound down, sir. No, I'll turn it down. I don't know. Does that help? Um, oh, does that? What am I doing? Hopefully, I'm not screwing everything up. Okay. Anyway, um, yeah, like we're not sure what kind of European, but like probably something. I don't know. I really don't. Because I've heard different stories from my family. Like some have been like, yeah, German immigrants, and then like I don't know. I am sassy today, Leo Empire. I'm extremely sassy today. I don't even know why. We could blame the full moon in Sagittarius, but I don't think that's what it is. Um, but anyway, I've heard multiple members of my family say, okay, they might have been German immigrants who like I don't know, they came over to the United States and didn't want to use their last name for whatever reason, and so they took on a new moniker. I've heard that it was Australian immigrants. So like, I don't know. Like I guess technically Australia isn't European, technically, you know. Um, I mean, I guess I mean, like if you're Aboriginal, definitely not European. But if you were like, you know, part of the penal colony, European, right? Anyway, um, so anyway, that's a really long way of answering that question as to whether or not I know a Kenton rainwater, and I do not. Um, Now, I might talk to a cousin in the near future and be like, "Oh yeah, I know Kenton." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I'll let you know. You never know. But yeah, I am very sassy today. To go back to that other topic that Leo was bringing up, and I've just been, I don't know, I've been writing on some kind of weird, like, have you ever had times where you're just like on a, I don't know, like an anger funk, like you're just angry for no reason, like crotchety, like just grumpy. It's not even grumpy. Like grumpy like kind of denotes a certain amount of passivity. Whereas like today I'm just like I need to find something to break. Like I need to find I just need to find some kind of a TV set or a old smartphone or something. I just need to like break things kind of anger. Not in a like look, I'm not breaking any windshields anytime soon. Um, but just that kind of like I need to grab a bat. I need to grab some kind of melee weapon and go to an empty field somewhere and like take my rage out on styrofoam or like punch a punching bag or I don't know, whatever. You know, it happens. It happens to all of us. So anyway, in reference to like Leo Empire's um, sassiness, and maybe that's what it really is. It isn't anger; it's sassiness. But I am in a very sassy mood. But yeah, I don't know. The rainwater. Look, all I know about my family is we have a story in our family that I do not know if it is true or not. It's kind of just like I don't know. Sometimes family has like sometimes families have like stories, you know, folk legends, folk tales, whatever. But in Louisiana, like the rainwaters, there are a lot of rainwaters in this particular town called DeQuincy, and DeQuincy is like a really small kind of rural town. Um, Towards like western Louisiana, like not really northwestern, but it's far enough from like the coast of Louisiana that you can say it's not southwest. So anyway, the story is here's the story. Um, there was a rainwater long, long ago, like I don't know, probably 1800s, that had some kind of situation where they like either like murdered the sheriff or the deputy of some town in Alabama and like fled the law and settled in DeQuincy, Louisiana. And like that's why there's so many rainwaters in DeQuincy, Louisiana. I don't know. Like allegedly that's allegedly a thing. I I'm I hear that story a lot and we like a lot of rainwaters like or in my particular group of rainwaters like to tell that story a lot. Um, I've heard it so many times that I'm just like, well, maybe, maybe not. It sounds like it could be a story. Um, and that's really all I know about the rainwaters. Like, you go to DeQuincy and, like, I think for a lot of years, for a lot of generations, you had a lot of rainwaters that were just like, I'm speaking specifically into Quincy, who were just like farmers, simple people doing things. DeQuincy as a town nowadays is like kind of a railroad town. Um, that's about it. It's a super small place that's just sort of in the middle of a bunch of things. Like it's right next to Texas, so like there are a lot of people who live there to like commute to Texas for work, but for whatever reason wanting to live in DeQuincy because I mean real estate there is pretty cheap. Um, just a quiet little town. So that's the rainwaters. That's the rainwaters I know. Now, like I said, like there've been a couple of times. Like there was a time I went to Taos, New Mexico, and like stayed there for about 3 weeks because I was really considering like moving there to live there for a bit. This is back 2021 ish, I think. And so a lot of Native Americans in Taos, and I would get in conversations with people, and I'd say my name, and they would have that moment where like, "Are you Native American?" And I'm like, "I no." And it happened so many times where I was just like, I feel like I need to wear a badge or something. Like, it's just one of those things that happens, when you have a last name like Rainwater. I've had people kind of assume that it was like a chosen name, like it was an artist name that I had adopted. And I was like, no, that was the name that I was handed when I was born on my birth certificate. I couldn't do much about it. Um, you know, like it's weird. There are a lot of people who really like that last name, and I don't know if it's just because of the sheer clarity of it. Because like so many last names are just kind of like in basically in other languages, right? Uh, in like English, I don't know, like English last names are always like weird mishmashes of like Germanic, Irish, or Celtic, I should say. Um, you know, like a McDougal or a Channing, a Pershing. But I've met a lot of people whose last names are like I know somebody whose last name is Price, which is like makes for a lot of really interesting puns on their name. Um, I was just trying to think like there were a couple other last names that I've known in the past where I'm just like, oh, that's a funny last name. Um, but anyway, what's in a name really? Other than like a set of vowels and consonants. I think I want to go with this. But this has been kind of like this page has been kind of a hard one. It's been any page that I draw where there's like five. Well, there's not five. There's four characters. Where there's like four characters all at once. usually takes a long time to draw, and there's a thing that happens for me where like I get far enough into where I'm at and I start to go like, maybe I should just like stop. Maybe I should just like quit right now. I'm starting to get tired. Like it gets kind of there's sort of a marathon vibe to it where you have to really sort of pace yourself. And this is one of those pages where that happens, where it's like, oh, I really have to pace myself. Pages where there's like a lot of background stuff, like environmental stuff, that can really take it out of me. But usually, like the ones that are the hardest are like, oh, there's like 4 or 5, or name the number of characters that you want. Like there's a couple of chapters in Trailer Park Warlock where anything having to do with like Henry and Leah in Hampton, those episodes always like stacked up because those characters all kind of like hang around each other. Um, and they add up fast. So like there's that arc where Jake and the penguins and the sheep and the starball, they all end up on the boat with Henry and Leah and Dan in Hampton. And there were so many characters to fit into panels that I would have times where I'm like, okay, I just gotta like stage this in a way where I'll have some characters just sort of like in a different area so that it's not just like everything's all jammed up, right? Like you really, in terms of like composition for a scene, you really don't want more than 5 characters at any given point in time. After that, it really starts to get, it starts to become too much information for the reader to like take in. Unless you're doing something where it's like an establishing shot, right? Like maybe you want to do a shot where you're just, there's no dialogue, there's no like really any other important information. You just want to get across like all these people are here at this time during this scene. And it's just like a quiet shot to sort of give your reader or viewer or whatever an idea of like what's about to happen. Like that's when you can like really just like, okay, we're just gonna cram every single character we possibly can that we need to get across is here. Or like maybe you're doing like a big action shot where you want to get across like a particularly big moment. Like I don't know, I'm just imagining something here. Let's say everybody's standing outside of a building and you've been like building this tension up of what's going on inside the office building or whatever. And maybe you have shots of like different characters kind of reacting because they know something is about to happen. And you have a big shot of like the explosion, and then everybody's like, oh, everybody's aghast taking it in. Like that might be a situation where you would want to use that many characters. But once again, like the focus isn't so much on the characters so much as it's like the whole of the moment. And those kind of things, like those kind of shots, you want to use kind of sparingly. You don't want to do that all the time. Like maybe if you're, a great exception to mention is an animated movie called Metropolis, and it's inspired by um, the original movie book, blah blah blah, called Metropolis. So there's the black and white movie by Fritz Lang, which turns out, I did not know this for the longest time, but learned that it's based on a novel by a writer whose name I forget right now. And then the black and white movie slash novel got adapted by Osamu Tezuka, who adapted it into a manga, and then and then a team of like really amazing animators got together much later on, around the late '90s, early 2000s, um, and they created a movie called Metropolis, keeping in line, with the whole thing. It's inspired by all that, and the movie is largely, there is plot in the movie, things do happen, but it is largely one of those movies where it's almost entirely vibes. And it's like a lot of like scenery and setting and environment, and you're giving you an idea of like what this world looks like, what it feels like, what's going on in it. Um, and really just like trying to give you sort of an idea, trying to just give you an atmosphere to live in for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, right? Um, anyway, the reason why I say that is like Metropolis, that version of Metropolis, and I will say like if you go to the Fritz Lang black and white film, I could also use that as an example as well, because it clearly inspired that later movie. Um, both of them use what I would call like the establishing shot, like to its like zenith. Like it uses the establishing shot in such a way that that's pretty much the entire way that the movie is told for the most part. Not to say that there aren't like close-ups, there aren't like other kinds of shots in the movie, but I'm trying to remember why I even mentioned this. But it does it in a way that I don't see too often, like in storytelling. Like you have to be careful with that kind of thing because you could easily bore a reader or a viewer. Um, so you have to like really kind of set your audience up for what you're going to do. Um, and so in that movie, it does a pretty good job of setting you up for it because it's already sort of like the atmosphere of it is very unique in it's like sci-fi because there's like robots and it's a giant city that has like all these different layers, going down to like this basement below the earth layer where all the underclass live and all this other stuff. um, so a lot of the storytelling in that movie is done through the environment, and it's a great way to tell a story. Not that many, I mean, there just really aren't that many stories that do that because it is hard to do. It is hard to like keep a viewer's interest to a certain extent, in the sense of like a lot of times viewers need to have some kind of personal drama to relate to get into a story. And if you're going to like go the route of, well, we're going to let the story of the world tell itself, that becomes a very like challenging thing to do. Because once again, like I was saying, like let's go, great example, Star Wars, right? Star Wars is one of those big world building type of stories. But all of the world building in Star Wars takes place almost exclusively in the background. There's certainly some stuff, and it depends on like which era of Star Wars we're going to talk about, but like if you want to talk about original trilogy, all pretty much all of the world building's done in the background. Like you don't have to know anything about what that world is like, how it operates. Um, you know, it's never really important how lightsabers work. You just know that they work. The mechanics of the Force are never really discussed in any sort of great detail or depth. And it's not important to the story, because what's important to the story mainly is you have, okay, a rebellion against an evil empire. Some kid from a rural desert farm community wants to go out there and explore the world and learn about himself. And that's about it. Like, that's the story. Like, if you really take it all in, like, that's the story of the original, like, of episode 4, right? And of course, it expands out. Leo's talking about the Andor series. I've heard that. So is that you mentioned the Andor series? I assume because it's a big world building type of show. Which, if it is, that's cool. That's more reason for me to want to check it out, because there, there, like I was saying earlier, there just aren't a lot of things like that. Um, but then you compare. Oh, there's a lot. Yeah. Okay. Leo was saying, yeah, with regard to world building. Verb says, I think that mostly comes from Star Wars being such a big and old franchise. The world doesn't grow very fast or much in proportion. And also, it's in space, which I kind of grows itself usually. That heart icon is in the way of that word. I'm annoyed. I can't do anything about it. Why did they do that? Anyway, hold on, give me a second, y'all. I'm like having a brain fart. Being such an big and old franchise, the world doesn't grow very fast or much in proportion. Well, also that, I mean, the world of Star Wars too, sort of, because it's cursed by its creators, is is destined to repeat itself. Also, like, and I get, like, that's part of the theme of Star Wars, right? Like, it's a theme of sort of this eternal recurrence sort of thing where it's like, um, there are these events that will just keep happening over and over and over, but in different ways. There's certainly, it also depends on how deep do you want to get into that rabbit hole, right? Because what I was gonna say too is, like, after the original trilogy, right? That was all Star Wars became, was world building and expanding outward. Like, case in point, the prequel trilogy, so episodes 1, 2, and 3, and they are part of the reason why they're not very popular with a lot of people is they're just very overwrought. And it's because, like, when that prequel trilogy was made, the whole kind of notion was to, like, set the case for why everything that happened in, episodes 4 through 7, 6, 4 through 6 happened. And you know, also the other aspect of that is George Lucas sort of, like, not having any pushback on sort of, like, where he wanted to go with his ideas. I'm not against the idea of it being yeah, exactly, like Leo Empire is saying. Midichlorians. uh, like, there in the prequel trilogy, there's just a lot of explanation given to all this stuff, and it's like midichlorians are like this reason for why the Force does stuff. Which is funny because they never really, like, I don't think that's ever covered ever again in any other, like, piece of Star Wars thing, right? Like, there's never, like, nobody ever, like, made, like, a midichlorian trilogy or whatever. We're just kind of told, like, there's some kind of thing, like, there's some kind of thing in the Force that Jedi have called midichlorians, and, like, It makes them do Force stuff, and after that, it's like you just kind of have to assume like, oh well, that's important because that's what Qui-Gon said. Um, but yeah, I mean, like the lore in Star Wars expands a lot in the after the are in the prequel trilogy and afterwards because that's all anybody like really gets interested in. Um, for some reason, Verb says midichlorians are one thing, but then you have brother, father, and sister, and the Lothwolves and all that. See, I don't even know what you're referring to, Verb. Um, there's and I you know it's kind of an issue with Star Wars is that like it's one of those universes that has expanded out so much that it's too easy to get lost in it. Like there's a point where you're just like after the original trilogy, I think if you're like a casual viewer, there's not really like great versus animated show stuff. Okay, yeah, that's so probably like what is it called? Clone Wars, probably. That's probably Clone Wars stuff. I never watched any. Oh, and there's like some other thing, other than I can't remember what it's called. It's like there's Clone Wars and some kind of like other thing that they did. They did a bunch of other animated shows. Um, yeah, there's like I guess actually I have a question for Verb. Where did you begin on Star Wars? Like, what was your first exposure to Star Wars stuff? Was it original trilogy or was it like, oh, that's what it's called, yeah, Rebels. That's right. Or was it like one of the cartoon shows that you started off with, and then that was like your gateway into Star Wars things? Because I kind of wonder and imagine that it's possible that for younger generations, like the lead into Star Wars starts somewhere else other than the original trilogy. Because that's where I started because that's all there was. Like I I started with the original trilogy on VHS back when CBS Fox was a thing. Leo Empire says not Genndy, the Clone Wars, right? The 3D like the CGI animated Clone Wars, the one that had like every opening is the kind of um, like old school film reel stuff where they're just doing like the meanwhile the Empire or the Republic is gone and blah 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 and now we find ourselves seeing Qui-Gon eating canned ham or whatever. I don't know. Oh, Verb says Dad showing me the original 6 movies on DVD or Lego Star Wars shows and comics. Don't remember. Okay, that's got to be interesting then. That's a very different way of getting introduced to Star Wars to have the entire like those entire 6 movies because I mean, okay, just from my perspective, when I was a kid, I really liked the Phantom Menace. A lot of people hate the Phantom Menace, whatever. Because for me, like I had watched the original trilogy like over and over and over again, and so the idea of like there being a new Star Wars movie like got me hyped, right? And like I'd saw the original trilogy over and over again, and then like also watched the original trilogy when it was re-released in theaters for the what do they call it, the special edition or whatever, with like the added CGI stuff and you know the the musical number, um, the all the random stuff in the background that was added for no reason at all. I didn't care. Like I didn't care at that age because I was just like, oh, that's cool. um, Times were simple back then. You didn't have to do that much to like re-release a movie in the theaters. You just be like, we added some junk in the background. Enjoy, you know. Um, but anyway, like I just remember like when Phantom Menace came out, I was pretty pumped, and like my entire family was pumped. Like I went and saw Phantom Menace with like my extended family. It was like it was a really big event for all of us. I remember it. And even though that movie is super stupid, I still enjoyed the hell out of it. Like the pod racing stuff was really fun. Like the cool the super cool Jedi fight scene at the end. It was all like stuff as a kid. I was just like, oh wow, this is like a whole new way to watch Star Wars. And now I as I was older, I was like, oh, okay, like this is pretty overwrought and baroque. But hold on, I'm gonna see what Verb says. Verb says I was 5 or something. Preschool we'd spend hours with my friend drawing Jabba's castle, aka a rectangle with a line or for 2 floors, and then throwing in rancors and stickmans shooting, making progress. In the battle until one side dies entirely or we go home. It got messy quick. That's funny. Leo Empire says Phantom Menace is probably still my favorite of the prequels, and I quote, oh, "Yeah, you do. There's always a bigger fish." A lot. It's a good line. It's a very good line. It's very random in that movie because it's so random in that movie because they're just like swimming around in that weird submarine vehicle. I don't even know why they're doing it. Were they going to like the Naboo kingdom or whatever to talk to the what was his name? The big boss of the Gungans, the Gungan boss. There's just so much in that movie. Okay, this is my thing with Phantom Menace in particular. They just throw so much at you, and there's no reason for it. Like, there's zero reason why they're throwing so much stuff at you. Like, going back to, yeah, Boss Nass. Thank you, Leo. And Leo also mentions a shortcut to Naboo through the planet core. Yeah, they just kind of like offhandedly throw that out there. Like we're just like, okay, I guess that's what you do. Um, there's just so much offhanded stuff just thrown out there, and like you're just supposed to take it all in, and it doesn't thematically go with anything in the story. So you're just sort of like a stupefied child taking it all in. And so, like, kind of going back to Metropolis, it's like all the world building in Metropolis ties into the core themes of the story. And so, it's very economically efficient as a story. Granted, that's not necessarily why Phantom Menace was made as a movie entirely. Like, particularly Phantom Menace. Um, Phantom Menace was, as far as I can tell, largely created for the purpose of selling a ton of toys and other licensed products, and to get people interested into a new trilogy so that they could get into the thematic stuff in 2 and 3. And 2 and 3, like Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, are way more honed in as stories. Not to say that they don't also have their fair share of like, why are you telling me like, why are you telling me this kind of stuff? Also, I'm complaining about this stuff, but I feel like I did a fair amount of this in Trailer Park Warlock, where I'm just like, oh, here's just stuff. Like, here's just lore stuff. You don't need this. Um, like, I think it's fun. This is also why I like Lord of the Rings for this reason. I know a lot of people don't like Lord of the Rings because they think it's overwrought. For all the reasons I just explained why Phantom Menace has issues. Um, like Lord of the Rings has a ton of lore and just overwrought sort of like trivia, you know? Um, pretty much everything I like is that way, actually. I mean, Star Trek is the same way once you get far enough into it, you know. Granted, like, like in Star Trek, like all the lore stuff usually ties into some episode or whatever, ties into like some kind of thematic thing or like ethical quandary that comes up in an episode or whatever. But anyway, yeah. So just kind of going what you were saying, Leo. There is nothing wrong with it necessarily. It just depends on like you know. I do have to say, like, from the perspective of telling a story, it becomes easier to lose your audience the more you sort of heap on in terms of lore, in terms of like information about the world that you're building. And so it's kind of a delicate balance, right? Because like we're all, all present have been exposed to Star Wars in some form or another, in like some form or another of Star Wars, right? Some incarnation of it. Because like the actual foundation of Star Wars is built on like good legs, right? It's built on like a pretty sturdy, you know, and we can go into the whole like hero of a thousand masks, Jungian archetypal, blah blah blah. But the point is like there's enough stuff in Star Wars that anybody can find some relatable entry point for it. Um, and then you have sort of like I don't know what to call it other than the extended universe sort of things where the animated TV shows get very extended universe. There's the novels, there's the Knights of the Old Republic, there's I mean pretty much everything after the original trilogy, right? Like I am heavily considering watching the six movies again because it's been a while. Like it's been a hot minute. Like I don't think I've watched a Star Wars anything since like 2017, I think. And those used to be things that I would watch like, on repeat like every couple of months or like once a year or something like that. And I mentioned this too because like recently I did that with Lord of the Rings where it's like, oh, it's been a while since I've watched Lord of the Rings. I'll watch that. And then I was just like, because I was going into my rewatch of Lord of the Rings thinking like, maybe I'm not going to be into it the same way I was when I was a kid. And then I'm going to get back to what you just said, Leo Empire. I wanted to finish my thought. And then I rewatched Lord of the Rings front to back, and like it was one of my favorite movie viewing experiences in a hot minute. Like watching it again, I really like those movies. I'm probably one day gonna reread the books too, because the books are really great. Um, they're just the books are just like it's so much information. Like it's I don't know. Tolkien like lived in that world. Lee Empire says, I just introduced a couple of people in my workout group to oral knots. Okay, so not including oral knots because I have watched a fair amount of that stuff. That is technically other Star Wars stuff that I have watched more recent than 2017. Verb says, why watch the movies if you can play Lego Star Wars? Why watch the movies when you can live there? Verb says, I need player two. That's funny. Uh, Leo Empire says, yeah, I'm excited to rewatch Lord of the Rings too. I enjoy those movies. I really do. Maybe I'm just a sap for like that kind of world building and like that kind of fantasy genre. And there's like, not a lot of it lately. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like that is something that I could rewatch again and again and again. But the reason why I want to rewatch Star Wars is because It's one of those things where it's like, well, you have things that influence you deeply from childhood and you kind of forget about it. And so when you revisit it, it's almost like um, you can almost clear out some baggage because you go, oh, okay, I can see how that influenced me creatively, or oh, I can see how like that has like influenced my thinking in some ways that I totally forgot about. Leo says, so the Oral Knot saga is Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, fair point. So I have watched Star Wars recently, just in a different form. I mean, I guess you could technically say the same thing about like Team Four Star for Dragon Ball Z, because it is pretty much Dragon Ball Z, but it's just in a different form. But yeah, I haven't watched Andor yet. I haven't really dealt at all with like any of the new Star Wars stuff. Um, and I think what happened for me is like after the newer trilogy, the whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, like the trilogy with Rey and Finn and all that stuff. I actually don't mind that trilogy overall. Like I like the movie that everybody hates out of that most recent trilogy. Everybody hates The Last Jedi. I think that movie's incredible. It's like one of my favorite Star Wars anything. And it's largely because it is so like that movie is like the anti-Star Wars franchise movie, and I really like that about it. Um, and it also introduces elements that I wish would have been further gone into in the last movie in the Rise of Skywalker, but they like had a complete sea change on how they wanted to do it and whatever. Like I personally thought that you could do a lot with a Kylo Ray like tag team if they really followed through that with that idea. I thought that was actually like a really interesting idea to go with. And it's the one idea in that trilogy that actually seemed new and fresh and I hadn't really seen done in any of the Star Wars media that I was exposed to. And I was like, oh, okay, let's see where we're going to go with this. And then Disney was like, no, 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 no. We just need to, like, don't do that. No. We're just going to. The Emperor's back. I don't know why. He's back. He's got clones. He's got clones of his clones. And we're going to kill the Emperor again. Spoilers, I guess. I don't know. Who cares? Uh, Verb says, Andor is weird. I don't like it. Probably too mature for me. It might. I mean, from what I've heard described about it too, it is like it's a very slow burn of a storyline. So like you might not like Metropolis at all right now. Like I don't know. You might be more into the like I don't know what the I'm trying to think. You might be more into sort of like having the action stuff, which is fair because action is fun. And I sometimes I'm into action movies and then sometimes I'm not. And like right now I'm kind of into slow burn stuff. Like I could just sit and watch a movie like 2001 A Space Odyssey, which is by all measures anybody who is like into modern movies would find it incredibly boring and slow and drawn out, but I just love it dearly. Um but that's another like well, that's a different kind of world building movie because it's super obtuse. Like you don't know why things are happening, and you have to kind of like put it together yourself while you're watching it. But yeah, from what I understand with Andor, like it's a very, it sounds very heavy from what I understand. Like it's very like, um, taking the world building in a very serious or a somewhat serious direction, and like kind of making you like think about all the things that are happening in that world. Which is probably, I don't know, like from what I understand, from my vague impression of what Andor is like, that is pretty different from a lot of other Star Wars stuff where it's like, you know, space opera, right? And wild, crazy things happen. And everybody goes home happy. Hero's journey stuff. Which, to be fair, I don't feel like there have been that many particularly great hero's journey stories in recent memory. But I'm biased. I was just thinking, like, I'm trying to. Oh, what does Leo say? It's very much ground level, so you get a very different perspective, and in that regard, there's a lot of world building, which is something I love. That sounds interesting to me because you don't ever get any of that in the movies, right? Because like all the movies sort of follow somebody who becomes somebody, if that makes sense. There's never like just some schmuck, you know. Verb says yes and no. I love the funeral tradition stuff and the bell ringing and the moral discussion, but it was just inconsistent and then disappointing or boring. Leo says there are several instances of we were in this state, now we're in this state, and make of that what you will and go to sleep at night. So it's just like people kind of taking in the events of the empire, I guess. Which sounds appropriate. Like, it sounds like an appropriate sort of way to tell a story dealing with those sort of themes. Because it isn't, yeah, kind of going back to what I was saying, it isn't really something you ever see in any of the other movies or any other material, right? Because most of them are very adventure serial type stuff. Leo says people are trying to do stuff, they cross lines, and it's arguable whether anyone is really better off. Oh, interesting. That sounds pretty heavy. That does sound pretty heavy for Star Wars. Cuz like okay, the only other time I can think of that was in the movie that I really like that everybody else hates, is The Last Jedi, where they suddenly do a couple bits of world building. Leo says it's raw, but it's slow. It's slow too. What verb saying is right? Like there's one moment in The Last Jedi where they talk to that thief guy or whatever who like is kind of like, oh, this whole war thing is like the whole thing's rigged, y'all, because the rich like just feed weapons to both sides and all this other stuff. And like that was the one moment that I had seen in a Star Wars movie where it's like, oh, okay, they're like really trying to go into some weird moral ambiguity territory. And it sounds like there's a fair amount of that in Andor, I would guess. Leo says it really hammers home the idea that the Empire puts everyone in a really terrible position. Yeah, that does sound heavy. Dang, y'all. But it sounds like it's probably pretty good too. I could definitely see why people enjoy it, because that's a great way to sort of like build off of build off of that world. Cause going back to like Phantom Menace, right? Verb. On contrary, I loved Book of Boba Fett until Mando took over, and not for action, mostly for the desert people time. And the music. I love Goran Son's music. Cool. I have no exposure to either of those things. I know a lot of people really liked The Mandalorian. I never watched The Mandalorian. I never watched Book of Boba Fett. Um, Largely because I just didn't want to buy a Disney Plus account. I'm kind of been thinking about it lately because there's Disney stuff that I do want to watch, actually. And it's mostly like all the really old animated movies, but there's a couple other things where I'm like, I might want to do that. Also because I want to get a bundle so I can watch baseball. Like, I'm kind of in this mood lately of like, maybe I just need to watch sports. Maybe I just need to become a sports guy. I'm having a phase. I need to get exposure to ESPN Plus, and the Disney bundle is my only way. But yeah, I know a lot of people really like The Mandalorian. Leo says, to me, the funniest moments are when someone mentions the Emperor, and I just remember Ian McDiarmid laughing and going, no, no, you must die. It's a bit of tonal whiplash because of context. There's also that Wait, the Sandland anime is on Disney? Wait, what? I knew that it was happening, but I had assumed it was on like Crunchyroll. Oh. You just said the thing that might get me to actually buy like a Disney Plus membership. Why? What? What a weird world we live in. I had assumed that it hadn't been completed or had just like not been brought over stateside yet. But okay. Dang. This might have to happen. Alright. Yeah, Verb says maybe on Crunchyroll too. I watched it on Disney Plus. If it's on Disney Plus, it's probably not on Crunchyroll. Disney's so proprietary with all their things. That would be weird. That would be strange to me. I don't know if I could put my head like I don't know if I could wrap my brain around that idea of Disney sharing something. Dang. Been trying not to get a subscription for the longest time. But yeah, I want to watch baseball. This is because last year I watched the men's World Series of college baseball when my hometown college, or I say where I live in Baton Rouge, the Tigers won the World Series, and that was a very fun. It was a very fun time. Everybody in the town was into it, and I was just like, you know what? I think I could get into baseball for realsies. Because baseball is basically just like Pokemon, but with people. Don't ask me to explain that, but that's how I that's how I came to understand baseball. The logistics of it work pretty much the same way. The what baseball is largely has way less to do between the players and has way more to do between what's going on between the coaches. It's basically two coaches fighting each other, using their players as like their chess pieces. And I know you could argue that with football and any sport, but like baseball, it really becomes obvious because decisions are made about who stays in, who goes out. Not saying this, baseball is also statistics for jocks. It is. It totally is. See, this is the concern I have is that I might get into baseball statistics and start discussing RBIs and stuff like that. Um, Verb says, I think it's funny how all my baseball and American football knowledge is based on cartoons. You know what, though? That's not a bad thing. Not necessarily. I think that's the most appropriate way to understand sports and to understand American sports in particular. Um, is a wacky. But hold on, y'all. I want to do a little bit of flatting while I have some time. Gotta open some things, shuffle some things around. But I'm trying to look for a page I want to reference. Want that. And then need a reference for that other bar. Where is it? Statistics for jocks. I just like the idea of like you couldn't get jocks to learn statistics and you're like, but wait, hold on a minute. What about baseball? And then suddenly, they're pumping in algorithms and junk. My grandma has several handwritten notebooks on ski jump statistics. Whoa. That's fascinating. I have a whole series of questions that I don't even know how to properly ask. Like I guess that's like length of the jump, speed of approach, things like that. That's a whole other world I'd never even considered. Like I wonder if there are people who are like crunching statistics on like curling. I'm sure there are. Like curling is a very like obtuse sport in a lot of ways. I've actually really enjoyed watching curling in the past. Like usually when the Winter Olympics comes around, I'll show up for curling. I think Olympics are this year, in fact. Not winter, but like summer Olympics. Because there's been some discussion about like there are some theaters that are going to like stream it, which I'm like, okay, that's different. I guess if you just want that stadium experience, I guess. I don't know. I might show up for that. I might just out of curiosity just like, okay, what's this like? Sports are one of those funny things where I did not care about them at all when I was younger. And then like now that I'm so exposed to narrative and I've gotten to this point where I'm like kind of beleaguered by it a little bit, I'm like, I need something that's just like, I need some kind of form of entertainment that's non-narrative. And sports very much fit that bill. Verb says, mostly leaderboards and links from all competitions Poland participates in. Once I was sitting with her and she correctly predicted the podium only halfway through the jump series. Whoa. Leo says, I used to care a lot more about the Olympics than I do now. I know, it's like when you find out about the economics of the Olympics and like how it kind of ruins a lot of stuff, like that really took me out a lot. Because like as a kid, I was like, whenever the Olympics came around, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna watch like the opening, and then that's usually all I ever watched. Like I never really paid a lot of attention to the actual sports elements. I just really enjoyed watching the openings where they like, there's a lot of sharing of cultural context and things like that. And there's often some pretty cool stuff, right? But the Olympics as like a institution, mm, you know, there's a lot to be desired. There's a lot to be desired. But I mean, I don't know. Like all sports are kind of that way at a certain point. Once they start to get institutionalized, there's some aspects of them that are like, oh, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. Entertainment, that's the entertainment world, or the world in general. Anywho, doesn't stop me from wanting to watch. Here's my problem. I can get into college sports because the kids have passion and they have something that they're trying to gun for. Once you're into like professionals, it's like this is these guys' jobs. Like they're just like, what are they playing for? They're playing for a contract, right? Or to get drafted in some other team and work their way up and whatever. Like and then going back to what Not Saved was saying, then you get into like the statistics aspects of it. Um, the strategy changes. It's like it's like the meta in Pokemon changes once you get into the professional leagues. I feel like there is a if I wrote a Pokemon series, this is the one that I would write, where it's like professional leagues and like Ash has finally worked his way up into like the real big leagues and starts to find like the seedy underbelly of, and they've probably already done the storyline, um, the seedy underbelly of the Pokemon world, where it's just like Moneyball type stuff. It's all about like getting contracts and all that stuff. Like that would be that would be the Pokemon story I would write. Which is basically like the Wachowski Speed Racer movie, which is an excellent movie, but probably one of the best um, probably one of the best anime adaptations I've ever watched. That's a movie that's up for a rewatch pretty soon too. I mean, Pokemon's one of those things where I'm sure plenty of stuff has happened in that universe, but I'm not privy to it. Leo says, I thought about that recently. I want to treat Pokemon like a world slash cultural tour where each game is a social studies slash biology class in disguise. Interesting idea. Verb says, on PE we usually play volleyball, and I like watching kids from competitive volleyball teams fail horribly because they expect everyone to play like professionals. That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's like any other thing. When it becomes competitive, you get meta. And meta is one of those things where I get the point of meta. Like you start to understand that there are strategies that are proficient if you want to win, right? But dang, does it sure like kill the buzz of playing a game. And I say this as somebody who my big thing for a long time, and I've probably spoken about this before, was League of Legends. And like in the olden days when it first came out and it was still kind of this thing where, there were a bunch of people playing it, but it was still like it was still nascent, right? it was still not the most competitive thing. It was very fun because everybody was like trying to figure out how all these characters work together. Like, what is even the point of like jungling? Or jungling wasn't even a thing. Like, there was just like in League of Legends, there was just like these random monsters that you could kill, and nobody really knew what to do with it or why it was there or what the point was. And so, random things would happen. There would be like sort of weird on the fly strategies that would happen. And then like I checked out of League of Legends for like maybe a couple months and I came back in, and then within that couple of months, that was when the meta was like established. And suddenly it was like I was now playing a totally new game, and everybody was just like, "Why are, you need to pick a role, and like if you're not doing this, you're doing it wrong," and blah blah blah. And it was just like, what happened to my game? Like, what did y'all do while I was gone? Um, and ultimately, what that led to was what would become, the Major League Gaming iteration of League of Legends, where it is now, right? Like, in its full quote unquote maturation, where now, like, the meta that was established by the player base has become institutionalized rule sets within the game itself. So I don't even know who would care about this. This terminology probably doesn't mean anything to you. But like for a long time in League of Legends, nobody understood fully how all these characters like interlinked with each other from a, if you thought about it as like how they relate to each other, right? So like roles like tank, damage dealer, or like zone mage type roles, and then the jungling roles, right? None of that stuff existed for a while, and then what happened is that the player base started building that language to, basically make their team dynamics more streamlined, so that some jackass could like order the other jackasses around to be like, we need a jungling role, we need a tank role, we need a DP, whatever. And after a while, like Riot Games started listening to the player base, was like, well, we'll just streamline it for them, and just force it into the game, which is where it is now, and where I've kind of like where I start to really officially log off of the game. Which is funny because the game actually has become way more playable. Because the biggest issue for League of Legends for the longest time was that the player community, and this is still the case. It's not like this has actually changed, but the player community is wildly toxic. Like just the most hate-filled bunch of jerks you could possibly find on the internet. And like for the longest time, I was just like, why don't they just offer an option to mute everybody? And Riot Games wouldn't do that. And then, like, I think it was around 2020. This was during COVID, so I was desperate. Really, this is the reality of it. During COVID, I was just like, I needed a game to play, and I was like, oh, I'll go back to League of Legends, and like, gracefully, a mute option had been added so that I could ignore my teammates. And then suddenly, that game was super playable because there are tons of other ways of like non-verbally communicating to teammates in that game. And granted, like they change it like every 5 seconds. Like they always update it every 5 seconds with some new junk. But it's an issue sort of with games is like as they become more competitive, you start seeing more and more stuff inserted into the game that makes it less fun and makes it more job-like, where it's just like League of Legends is still pretty playable, but the fact that you have to like pick characters now to fill specific team roles or else you're going to get ire from like your teammates is annoying. It's really annoying. And it really takes away, like, for me, what was the joy of playing that game in the early days of, like, you could really experiment around with a lot of things, and you weren't like forced into any particular position, so you could try new things and see how it worked. Verb says you can always go Leroy Jenkins, which I have done a fair amount. I have done a fair amount on that game. And frequently you will see, or I don't know if this is still the case because of how much the dynamics have changed, but that would be frequently a thing that people would do where they would just either go AFK or like, you know, just sabotage the game basically. you know, like um which I think is fair. When you have people acting like jerks, it's like, well, you kind of ask for this, so you reap what you sow. Oh, there's like a line. No, maybe not. I would say there's never really been a game that I've been addicted to, but I would say League of Legends was that game. Like, I was actually addicted to that game. And I was able to quit that addiction, and there's still a part of me in the back of my head that's like, yeah, but you could always go back. I will not, but I will say if there was a game, like if I just disappeared and you're like, what happened to Matt? You'll know what's happened. I, I was just like scoping around. And I was like, oh wow, they've got all these like new characters in League of Legends. I want to try them out. Oh, they've got like a new map finally after like 2 decades. New items. New skins. I have to play this game now. That's it. I give up. But I've been taking a break from video games a fair amount recently because I really got into bullet hell shooters for a while, and then like started having like carpal tunnel issues from playing bullet hell shooters because they're very like they're very button mashy, and I was like, I kind of want to not have that. And because I knew directly like what the source of that pain was coming from, I was like, okay, I guess I'm just not gonna do this right now. I'm just gonna take a break from it, even though I was so close to like one CCing death smiles. I mean, I could still do it. I think I've still got it in me, but I'm just not gonna do it right now. Like, I gotta find a month where I'm gonna devote myself to beating death smiles once and for all. Verb says, my friends were making board game adaptations of League of Legends, but I think they stopped after early tests. It was just for a university project. I could actually see that game working out pretty well as a board game too. Like that, I feel like it has like a pretty easily translatable flow for that. Leo says, have you played Unicorn Overlord? I have not. Let me see what that looks like real quick. I'm just going to look at some screenshots. Unicorn Overlord. What is this? Oh, wait. It's got grids and stuff. Oh, no. What are you trying to do to me, Leo? This looks very Tactics Ogre-ish. I take it that you've been playing Unicorn Overlord? I like the art a lot. It's a pretty looking game. So I'm gonna take it's like strategy RPG, and you develop towns and stuff in your units. Sort of a yeah. I'm just gonna assume that it's kind of tactics ogreish based on the screenshots. Oh, okay. Leo says, I haven't yet, but I want to. And funny you should mention, he actually said to people asking for a Tactics remake to play that game. Interesting. So, wait, when you say a Tactics remake, you mean Final Fantasy Tactics? I'm assuming. It's the only thing that I can assume you mean when you say a Tactics remake. Ah, every time I try and make a break for video games or away from video games, I get roped back in with all these pretty graphics, anime women. Leo says, "Yeah, but I mean it's the same. Oh, it's the same developer of Tactics. Interesting. Very interesting. Dang. I'm gonna have to see if it's available on Steam." Verb says, "Fallout Tactics crying in the corner. Deserved." I didn't even know there was a Fallout Tactics. This is a big day for me. I'm learning a lot. See, like a strategy RPG, that would be kind of good. That would be kind of fun. I got very close into like wanting to play. What was the name of those games? The Romance of the Three Kingdoms games. I think that's what they're called. There's like a million iterations of them. They're like on like 16 or something right now. Because I was just like, oh, I really want a strategy, tactical, like a strategy RPG type game to play. And then like I looked at it, I looked at the game itself, and it's math. Like it's just like it's too much. It's too much number crunching and like management. And I get like that's kind of part of the appeal of strategy RPGs is to have a certain amount of management involved. Like you have to have like that's part of what makes them interesting. But that is a pretty delicate balance. Like I think that was part of the fun of Final Fantasy Tactics is like building your team, getting your party together and like finding like okay, which classes like work best together, what is like the best build and then later on you find out like well, like really you just need to give everybody like the same moves that are the best moves in the game. uh, I mean, it's been a while since I played that game, so I don't really remember it that well. I think that's why I got so into Advance Wars when I was into it. Is like the strategy, like Advance Wars is almost entirely strategy, and there's no real RPG elements to it, and so it becomes more like each match becomes like a game of chess, but like really wacky chess. Like if you crossed chess with like Street Fighter 2, basically, that is my best definition of what Advance Wars is like as a game. And it's a very like simplified sort of strategy game, but there's enough there that you can really chew into it and kind of like find interesting situations in sort of almost puzzle-like elements when you play like the campaign mode. I would say as a game for like competitive play, and by competitive play I mean you're just like playing against your friends or whatever. It kind of boils down into like the same sort of strategies pretty fast. But I guess that's like every strategy game, right? Like that's StarCraft, right? Like StarCraft very quickly divulged into like Zerg Rush. It seems like with strategy games, developers have always had like a challenging time trying to find a way to make a competitive strategy game that had enough like diversity to its elements that you could kind of have different things. Maybe that's just like, I mean, honestly, maybe that's just like the fate of competitive play. Is like you really, or at least when it comes to video games, is like you really don't have at the end of the day that many elements that you can randomize enough to make the competitive play seem dynamic. I mean, there are exceptions to this. Like fighting games have a fair amount of exceptions to this depending on which game you're playing. But even then, like, stuff gets meted out pretty fast in fighting games. But like strategy games seem particularly bad about it, where it's just like, oh, okay, we already found this one thing that works, and we're just going to do that ad nauseum, and then rinse repeat. Which is what makes sports sort of. I think that's what makes sports interesting to people is like the dynamics involved in sports are such that you're always going to have. Like I know, like I'm a sports apologist today. Forgive me. Um, the dynamics of sports are such that all of the randomness comes from just life being life, right? Like wind, uh, something going on in the player's head, like just all that stuff makes it such that you're never gonna you can't meta it out 100%. You're always gonna have some sort of life thing create chaos within the game. And maybe that's just like maybe that speaks to just a current issue in video game development that like things are so overly simplified in so many games that you can't create that enough dynamics. Or conversely, the games that become competitively popular are such that they're very easy to meta out. Verb says, if you want a game that's good for your carpal tunnel, there's this Polish one called Super Hot, an FPS, pretty intense but with rather little clicking. Enemies die from one shot and time is slow-mo. Interesting. Oh, I think I probably heard of that game too. I'll have to look at it. Sometimes I'm into FPSs and sometimes I'm not. Like the last one I played was Doom. Doom was fun. It was a very clicky game. There was a lot of clicking in that game. I enjoyed the hell out of it, but like, I can only play a game like that every so often. Because it's super overstimulating. It's also like one of those games where if you're playing it correctly, you feel like you're about to go crazy because you're just so into the twitchy kind of mindset that it establishes for you to be good at it. Which those are fun. I do enjoy a good twitchy first-person shooter. Leo says you want to feel like John Wick. Okay, yeah, Verb was clarifying, saying it's not multiplayer, it's a bunch of levels. And then Leo says, super hot. Super hot. And then Verb just says, super in all caps. I'm going to have to admit, that last exchange is a little esoteric to me. You know, it's a good point that you bring up, though, because tactical or whatever you want to call it, strategy RPGs can be pretty clicky in the sense of when you're managing stuff. Verb says, also, it's the most innovative shooter I've played in years. I'm having like deja vu right now. Oh, okay. Leo was saying the announcer does that when you clear a stage. Oh, so that's what Leo and Verb were talking about earlier. I do not get deja vu that often lately, but today was the first day I've had it in quite a while. All right. I have some errands I need to run in a second. Still have a bunch of work I need to do, but it'll have to get done later. Anyway, oh, Verb asks, what is deja vu? Elaborate, please. Yeah, before I go, okay. Deja vu is the sense of having experienced something and you think you've already experienced it before. So, like, there's been a lot of explanations for what deja vu is. I cannot explain any of them to you other than like some BS from the Matrix. Um, but yeah, basically that's what deja vu is. Is like if you ever have an experience. Oh, what deja vu did you just have? The deja vu I had was you Verb talking about not specifically super hot, but just the line. Also, it's the most innovative shooter I've played in years. That part, I was just like, something happened. There was a glitch in the Matrix or whatever. Verb says, dude, I know what deja vu is. I watched the Matrix. That's funny. But yeah, I would say it's been quite a while since I've had deja vu. So I don't know. You apparently triggered it, Verb. I don't know what that means. Anyway, y'all have a good rest of your evening. I'm gonna go run some errands and then eat food because I'm hungry. So anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye. Oh, wait. I always screw this part up. Oh, wait a minute. I am not done. I'm going to do this correctly because I never do. Since I've remembered, I'm going to embarrass all of the Patreon members by saying their names. Eternal gratitude goes to Troy Morris, Paul Rainwater. Special thanks to Pharmacist Judge, Danielle Rainwater, Leo Empire, Dark Link, Matt Walters, GFY, John Durrett, Sudi Shearwater, and y'all have a great rest of your stuff. And we will talk again soon, alright? Bye.